welcome back to another episode of Ask Leah as part of the Areas of Sexpertise series. I'm your host, Aspen Gengenbacher.
And I'm Leah Hemming. I'm a nurse practitioner and ASEX certified sexual wellness counselor and owner of Hemming Sexual Wellness Clinic.
Awesome. And for the Ask Leah video series, we pretty much take your questions that you submit to us and we have Leah give her take on them. So if you are interested in submitting any questions, we have a 100% anonymous submission form, and we will link that below. We've got a few pride questions to get through. The first one says, seems like everyone is gay. Why do we need to have pride everywhere? And another person had asked, why is Pride Month treated like such a big deal? So to you, why do you think that it's important to celebrate pride?
Well, first and foremost, I'm excited that someone is feeling like everybody is gay. So that's exciting because to be gay is to be happy. So that's awesome. Number two, why is pride important to celebrate? So to go to the root of the word pride for Pride Month, which is June, is to be proud. And as a heterosexual person interpreting their month, I would assume that they did not feel like anyone was proud of them. For instance, we feel pride from the people around us, our safe people, our parents, our teachers, our clergy, the people that are important to us. That's something as humans we often try to achieve, is to feel like we've done something that our parents, our coworkers, the safe people around us would feel proud of us. And so I feel like maybe the word pride has been used in the non-heterosexual celebration because they're all about wanting people to feel proud of them like everyone else does.
Yeah. And that question had kind of sparked an interesting question in my mind of, are we getting gayer? Are we getting, are there more people that identify as LGBTQ now because it's, an ideological difference, or is it a societal difference in the way that people feel more comfortable coming out? And I think that is definitely the case, the latter, of people feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more safe coming out now. In the early 2000s, only about 30% of Americans supported same-sex marriage and 60% were opposed. But as of 2023, that pretty much had completely flipped, and now over 60% support gay marriage. And then also, nearly 1 in 10 Americans now identify as LGBTQ, according to a recent Gallup poll. And that number has doubled since just 4 years ago. So if we're looking at the numbers alone, yes, it would suggest that more people are identifying as LGBTQ. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that more people are LGBTQ identifying. It's just that more people are identifying that way publicly. It's that they feel safe and they feel comfortable to be able to do so, and that's because our culture has changed a lot within the past 25 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that maybe we are becoming more kind as society. We're being more accepting of others. I read a book recently that says you have three types of personalities. You have your own personality, you have your work personality, and then you have your secret personality. So hopefully we are providing an environment as society that we are more kind, and with kindness comes safety, and people also perceive that LGBTQ banner differently. So, what makes someone homosexual? What makes someone identify as queer? What makes someone identify as gay? What makes somebody? I mean, it's completely, I don't consider myself to be a cross-dresser, but do I wear my husband's sweatshirt? Yeah, because it makes me feel good and it makes me feel like him. But would that be wrong if someone's husband wore their opposite sex wife's underwear? What's really the difference? Does that make me a cross-dresser? I don't think so. So it's all upon what your perception of that title is.
Right. And I also want to hit on, too, that the existence of LGBTQ folks, that's nothing new, right? We've seen that across history, going back as far as pretty much human history was recorded. Indigenous cultures, we see that in what's known as a two-spirit being that embodies both masculine and feminine energy.
There was no such description word in an indigenous society for same-sex relationships. There was no such because it was so common.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And then too, in subcultures in South Asian countries like India and the Philippines, those are also places where multiple genders outside of male or female are acknowledged, and not only are acknowledged and accepted, but they're oftentimes kind of seen as having a heightened spiritual awareness. In a lot of indigenous cultures, they would take on the role of a healer or some other kind of
higher entity.
Yes, yeah. And then too, I mean, in ancient Europe, we would have these warriors that would couple up together because they believed that if they were engaged with one another, that they would fight harder. So male homosexual relationships were not at all uncommon in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And that's in addition to the existence of same-sex couples and multiple genders in mythology of those cultures as well.
Every living being has a masculine and feminine energy, and masculine and feminine DNA. So every living thing has both kind of parts to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Even in in the U.S., the most common spiritual being that's referenced is God, and God is a non-binary.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Why is it that many sexual health educators push for so much inclusion or homosexuality? What does that have to do with sex?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know as though we push for homosexuality, but we push for doing what feels right. And we push for what makes you feel best and what makes you feel loved. We definitely push for equality, because I think everybody wants to be treated the same. Everybody wants to feel love. Everybody wants someone to feel proud of them. And so it's like with anything else, when you're an adult and you're mature enough to recognize other people's feelings around you. It'd be no different if I was a recess monitor on a playground. If I saw that someone was getting picked on, I'm going to give extra attention to that person or that child that's not, in my opinion, getting treated fairly. And so I think as sex educators, we recognize where the minorities are, not just in sexual health, but in all of the world. We recognize what is still being oppressed, what is still being suppressed, and what is still not giving fair choice. And I think we probably have even more compassion for the minorities that don't necessarily feel like they have a voice or feel like anyone's been proud of them.
Yeah. And two, I think that there's a lot of educational disparities for LGBTQ folks.
100%.
If there's ever even any sex education provided at all, it's typically geared towards heterosexual people, right?
Towards white heterosexual people, yes.
And what kind of impact do you think that has on LGBT young people that really are not finding any place of legitimate information that they can access to learn more about themselves, about kind of other people that are kind of going through the same thing that they are? What kind of impact do you think that has on them?
Oh, I think I think we are now as a society way more aware of it than we ever have been. Do we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. Textbooks. It's nothing about other than being heterosexual is ever taught in school. So just even the fact that we reference a person and we don't know if that person identifies as male or female or what their pronouns are, we automatically assume that we should call them he or him. And so just kind of undoing some of the really old, antiquated language would help tremendously. And so the fact that we are now asking pronouns instead of assuming that someone looks at me and says, "Oh, ma'am," well, am I?
Yeah.
Because I dress a certain way one day, does that mean that's who I am? So if I wore my husband's sweatshirt in, would you start calling me he or him? So asking people what they want and just being aware of it, being aware of it and showing compassion.
Right. This is kind of similar to the first question that we answered, but why do we need so much attention for LGBTQ? Why do they need a whole month to celebrate, or why do we even have to recognize them at all?
They don't need a whole month to celebrate, I agree. They need an entire year. The month to celebrate is just to bring awareness. When we have to stop and celebrate things, it's because they have been severely, severely oppressed. Why do we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day? Shouldn't we be celebrating what he stands for every single day? Why do we celebrate D-Day? Why do we celebrate the independence of America and Juneteenth? Because they were important and because it was great tragedies that we celebrate. So I agree. I disagree. We should not celebrate the entire month for Pride or LGBTQI. We should celebrate the entire year like we do everyone else.
And I just wanted to touch a little bit too on, you were pretty much saying that they deserve to be celebrated because of the hardship that they have endured.
And continue to.
And continue to endure. So I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about existing discrimination, some anti-LGBTQ legislation that is currently underway, as well as the suicide rates of LGBTQ folks, because we know that LGBTQ populations are more likely to commit suicide, they're more likely to become homeless, they're more likely to be a crime or a victim of a violent crime, a victim of a hate crime. We know that they are going to face a lot more difficulty in having a successful outcome in comparison to non-LGBTQ folks. So just to give some stats to anyone who is interested, LGBTQ folks are 5 times more likely than non-LGBT people to be victims of violent crime, and that comes from the National Crime Victimization Survey of 2022. And LGBT people are 9 times more likely to experience violent hate crimes than non-LGBT people. And in asking LGBT people themselves what they thought would improve that statistic, they said that more support from religious leaders and greater representation in politics and entertainment would be helpful. So I think that alone touches on why it's important to kind of take an extra moment to acknowledge the achievements of Pride and to acknowledge how much farther representation still needs to come in order to get those numbers down, because those numbers are not, that's as of 2022, 2023. It's not like those numbers are from the 80s, So I think that anytime that there's a disparity in the likelihood of somebody being a victim of violent crime and of violent hate crimes as well, I think that alone should say something that that we need to be looking closer at how to be addressing that disparity. And then let's see. Nearly 3 in 4 gay or lesbian adults and about 7 in 10 transgender adults say that they've been subject to slurs or jokes because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And only 3 in 10 transgender adults say that their parents have been accepting of them. So that, again, speaks to the...
What was that number?
Only 3 in 10 transgender adults say their parents have been accepting of them, which... I fight with my parents, but I know that at the end of the day, they love me, so I cannot imagine how disruptive it would be to my mental and emotional well-being, and eventually probably my physical well-being, if I knew that I wasn't supported
or loved
at all, or
yeah.
loved. It's no surprise that the suicide rates are so much higher for this population because they are constantly left without support. In terms of legislation that affects their life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that they are entitled to, 850 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced this year, and that is a record-breaking...
Anti?
Yes. Record-breaking figure.
Why
that could apply to things like banning transgender people from using the bathrooms that they identify with. That could look like civil rights protections being eliminated for LGBTQ folks, as what happened in Iowa. So essentially another way of putting that is it is legal to discriminate against certain populations if you're in Iowa.
Are we going to have segregated water fountains again too?
Who knows? Who knows? They have not proposed the water fountains yet that I am aware of, but I think that it isn't that far off to suggest that a lot of this legislation is kind of coming from a similar place of, we don't want that here. We don't want that intermingling with us kind of attitude. And we'll kind of get into the science of a lot of that kind of thing, of the differences between in brain chemistry and the science of hormones, and a little bit of the science of anything involving transgender people in sports as well. We'll get into that in an upcoming column. But for the bathroom bans, for example...
Bathrooms are a basic human right.
Yeah.
It's a basic human need.
Right. And I think about the way that those are to be enforced. And a lot of these bathroom bans, even the ones that have passed, they don't specify how these bans will be enforced. They say that if a transgender woman is using the women's bathroom, that is not allowed. In Utah.
So are they going to allow someone that's had a hysterectomy not to use a women's bathroom because she doesn't have some of the female... I guess it depends on what are they defining as a woman.
Well, that, and also, like, are we going to have bodyguards outside of bathrooms that are going to be either, one, checking people's IDs, or two, checking people's body parts? Because that's really weird.
Very odd.
And I think that that's the most practical objection to it, of how do you plan on enforcing this without infringing on people's rights any more than it already is by the very fact that it's introduced at all. But, I mean, we look at the implications of something like this. It's causing cisgender women to also be profiled as being trans. A perfect example of that was an Algerian boxer from this last round of the Olympics that was kind of caught in the crossfires of a ton of misinformation that claimed that she was transgender, and she wasn't. She was born as a woman. She had only ever fought in the women's what's the word I'm looking for? Women's division, and she had her whole.
She looked masculine.
She looked masculine. She was very tall, broad shoulders.
So they assumed she was born a different gender?
Yes, just by the photos of her. And
gosh.
I think that's pretty much how a lot of these bans are being enforced, is we're looking at how people look. So in imagining how that could affect someone that was born as a woman that is trying to use the women's restroom, but that might be a little bit more tomboyish, a little bit taller, speak with a little bit of a lower voice, be a little bit more muscular, broad shoulders.
Has this passed all this
In some
stuff?
states, yes, yeah,
Huh.
yeah. In Utah, for example, the enforcement is by birth certificate, and that's across public institutions. So if you go into a public library and you are a trans person and you are not using the bathroom that you should be using according to your birth certificate, that is against the law there. And again, don't know, that specific one is in Utah, but there's tons of bathroom bans that have been at the very least proposed, and in several states they have been enacted. I believe that South Carolina and Alabama were a couple of other ones.
When did we care so much about what our body parts look like?
And I think
so
that
unusual.
The big argument for the bathroom bans is that, well, I don't want there to be a man in the bathroom that my little girl's going to the bathroom in. And it's like, well, that's going to be really uncomfortable for your little girl to see a trans man using the bathroom, because in a lot of instances, you cannot tell that anyone is trans. So
right.
It's like double harmful, because if you're just basing things on what someone looks like.
Aren't they in a stall?
That too.
Unless they line up, I guess, at the urinals, which is unusual for me anyway, because I've never urinated through a penis right next to somebody else, which I find is very odd, but yet they defecate behind a door.
Yeah.
But whatevs. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't realize that you had to expose your body parts to proceed to do a basic human need.
Yeah. And
interesting.
And I want to clarify as well that no states that have proposed or implemented such bans, none of them have said, okay, we're going to put bodyguards outside of, or we're going to put guards outside of the bathroom.
So they're non-enforceable.
To check if someone is going into the right ones. But they are suggesting that business owners and managers of public institutions kind of enforce it themselves. If they see someone that is going into the wrong bathroom, they need to call that in, because that is against the law.
Or maybe like not give them toilet paper.
Yeah. But I also think like that's putting a burden on business owners too, of it's already difficult to run a business, and now you have to be
checking
constantly
people's
looking back to the bathroom to
genitalia.
See if the right people are going into the right bathroom.
And I guess it depends on what body parts they happen to look at too.
Right. Yeah. So I think in general the bathroom bans are harmful not only to trans people but also to
anyone that has
people.
to excrete.
Yeah, anyone that has to go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
it's kind of complicates that. And then, I already talked about the removal of civil rights protections in Iowa. A little bit on LGBTQ.
Are we required to do that in our homes, or
to
ask everybody
bathrooms?
to look at their genitalia or different body parts or organs to see?
It's wild when you think about how does. I think that there are a lot of things that
I'm not going to let you in my house if you're missing your gallbladder.
Right.
We are a full gallbladder house. Appendix? Oh, no. You have to go to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, simplifying it to what it is and, okay, what does this mean? Why are we actually doing this? What does it look like to enforce it? No one can really answer a lot of those questions.
Don't we have people, starving to death still? And
there's that, too.
There's kids that, too. Only getting fed when they get to school,
there's that too.
We talk about that.
There's that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so with all of the anti-LGBTQ legislation that pretty much reduces the rights of LGBTQ people and the protections that are in place for them, the Trump administration is closing the LGBTQ youth suicide hotline next month. So I think that a lot of times a suicide hotline is kind of that last opportunity for an intervention. So when we're taking that away, in addition to a lot of the other things that, help LGBTQ populations feel more welcome, feel more accepted, feel safe, that's really, really alarming, I think, to hear. that hotline, just in the past couple of years, has provided services to more than 1.3 million LGBTQ young people, who, by the way, are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers. And then in comparison to the general population, 17% of LGBTQ adults had attempted suicide during their lifetime in a recent survey, compared to only 2.4% of the general population. And about 40% of trans people had reported attempting suicide. So that's, I mean, you take not even 3% of the general population compared to 40% of trans people. That is...
Well, and by the suicide hotlines, how you get to anybody's story, we have 2 main emotions on each spectrum, and you have to have both for balance. But the main emotion on the left-hand side is fear, and underneath fear is anxiety, stress, sadness, anger, rage, solemnness, and the other emotion on the other side is safety. And so under that is joy, happiness, elated, euphoria, hope, all of those things. And so we have to have both sides of emotions, but by the time someone is calling a suicide hotline, their fear emotion is so far out of balance from their safety. And so I guess I don't really understand why we're taking safety away when we're taking away these programs. It's
Right.
essentially saying we are going to give you even more unsafe conditions.
Yeah, and we're reducing the civil rights protections that also keep you safe as well. So I think, yeah,
Going
to kind
back
of
to the 1800s.
Yeah, I think to
makes
kind
me
of
wonder if we're going to be able to drive and vote still.
I know.
Or if we can leave the house.
I had to stop watching Handmaid's Tale for a reason. But anyways, so I think in conclusion, I mean, there are lots of things that I don't understand about the world and about why our lawmakers make the laws that they do. But I think that if we are to look at this from an analytical standpoint, we have a population that we know is more likely to commit suicide, more likely to become homeless, more likely to struggle with mental health, more likely to encounter discrimination in the healthcare system, and pretty much in any other environment, they're more likely to be discriminated against in the workplace. They're more likely to be ostracized. Bathrooms, they're more likely to be ostracized by their friends, family, peers. We know that all of that together contributes to a population that is not built for success. And so I think that if a lawmaker's goal is, I want to have as many of my constituents happy, healthy, and so much so that they are able to go to work and they are able to pay taxes and be productive members of our society. And so at the very least, if human rights concerns are of no concern to a lot of lawmakers, I think that at the very least they should be concerned about the health of people that will not be able to contribute as much if they don't feel safe to do so. These are a lot of people that contribute a lot of valuable things to our society, and without them, we would have a gigantic piece of the puzzle missing that we wouldn't be able to fulfill. So I think that, if we want to curb homelessness, if we want to fix mental health rates, if we want to reduce suicide rates, like all of that kind of ties into the way that LGBTQ folks are treated and represented in politics and media, and just the level of respect that the population receives. So I think that was kind of the goal of kind of going through all of this, was to kind of talk about the very real things that LGBTQ people face still, regardless of how much progress has been made in the past 40, 50, 60 years, there's still a lot to go. And like I said, 850 anti-LGBTQ bills being introduced this year is a record-breaking figure. So whether we are going in the right or the wrong direction in terms of progress, I guess remains to be seen. But that's all for today. Leah, do you have any final notes?
No, I am thankful that there are people that want to go into lawmaking and kind of trying to keep the peace. I'm glad I'm not in that position. My position is just to educate, as is Aspen's position. So there's a lot of things that are going so well in the world today, and I think the fact that people of the same sex can walk down the street and hold hands. More so than they ever used to be able to. I think the fact that we don't have to have two separate drinking fountains. I think the fact that Aspen and I can speak without our husbands giving us permission to, all of this is wonderful compared to where we've started. And it's a continuum, and it'll continue to be beautiful. And we'll have some yucky in there too, but it's still a beautiful place.
Yeah. And thank you so much to everyone that has submitted their questions. Once again, if you have any questions that you'd like Leah's take on, we will link our 100% anonymous submission form below. And with that, we bid thee adieu. Thank you so much for tuning in. And don't forget, you're sexy when you know stuff.